But the Stoops part of it was that's where it went. That was one of the crazier things I've covered. That was one of the crazier things I've covered in 25 years of it.
Yeah.
Was that.
So are you personally responsible, you think,
yeah,
for Stoops not being the coach right now?
You see any blood on these hands? I do not.
For saving the 12th man. I mean,
I am fired up about Elco.
He's a nice man. You know, that's what we got to say. He's a good family man, Stoops, but he's a C coach. You would have been getting a C coach.
And here was my thing about it. And I was like, okay, like, there'll be a tough football team. I was worried about recruiting at the requisite level, and we know what that level is. Right. I don't care how much NIL you have. I always say, like, people go, A&M's got it's not unlimited, because the limit is when people get tired of giving away their money.
Yeah.
For losing football teams or players leaving that they, hey, we spent all this money. We got this number one class now. And that's just not A&M. That's everywhere. And it's going to be so fleeting.
Yeah.
Like Texas fans are flying high right now. They went to the playoff, and they should be. Tennessee would be. A&M would be.
Right.
Go 8-4 next year in the SEC and see how that donor that gave $10 million to NIL feels the next day about the next time you go. So it's not unlimited money, So everyone that wants to win is swimming in kind of the same NIL pool. I don't care if you're 15 million NIL, 10 million, 8 million. Like, the individual player is going to have several options to get paid real money to play somewhere, and they understand that. So it's not just like, well, A&M's got NIL money, so it doesn't really matter if the coach can recruit or not.
Yeah,
it's not true. And I was worried about Stoops in that regard. And then the other thing was, I just felt like there were a lot of similarities. I felt like it was like going and you were firing Jimbo and paying all this money to fire him. And then I felt like you would have been hiring someone kind of in a similar position had he come here.
Right.
And so now you're paying Jimbo $9 million a year to fire him. And you'd had to pay, they were going to pay Mark Stoops $9 million. So you went from paying $9 million for Jimbo for essentially $18 million to have both of them, and it's just like,
so when
Elco gives more, I think, hope and energy and excitement.
When you heard that initially, the Stoops coming down to A&M, what transpired immediately? Like when you got from a credible source that this is legit.
So it was very credible, and it was outside of A&M, and it was, I believe, Friday. I'm like, okay, I don't want to ask around too much because I don't want, sometimes in this business, it's like, well, you try to talk around like reasons why, like maybe, so I'm not going to just blast it out there. I put it in an update on Friday where I mentioned several names. Kyle Whittingham at Utah was a candidate that no one ever really talked about. There were people that were candidates that people, no one talked about. They talked a lot about Jed Fish. Mm-hmm. He was someone they looked at, but he wasn't as high on the list as people think and as Aggies think, because they were fixated. A lot of people thought it was going to be Elco or Jed Fish. Mm-hmm. And Whittingham was a real candidate. I mentioned that, but I said Mark Stoops is a name that if there's one name that I'm hearing that I feel like there's more momentum behind, it's this one. And it was as, I don't know how subtle that is, but it wasn't like, but people saw it like this, flashing lights. Yeah. And they got so pissed at the thought of it. And then by Saturday morning, it starts coming out, and you guys know how this goes. So Saturday morning, they're talking about it on game day, all the pregame shows.
Yep.
Aggie fans are getting more and more worked up. And all I didn't put Ross on the spot or anything, but all I said was like, you're going, if you want to know how these regents at this meeting Saturday night, they were going to, I guess, go present, hey, here's our guy. Mm-hmm. What they're going to be thinking, what you're walking into, there it is. Because at the end of the day, all these schools we cover, all these fans watching, we all know this. Yeah. The biggest donors, the most influential people, the regents, the they're all, at some point along the way, they started out just like you and I did. Like they were at the school, they were fans, and now they're even more so because they're so personally invested, whether it's their time, their money. So you can look on TexAgs, and you can assume that everyone's reading it, and you can assume that their reaction to something, whether it's positive, negative, lukewarm, off the charts, insane, you can get a pretty decent feel for it by judging that.
Yeah.
And it sounds wrong, but it's not wrong. It's right, and it's going to be right anywhere when there's a message board of that magnitude. I mean, you guys saw what happened with Tennessee and Shiano, and
Yeah.
so when it was going like that, I was like, man, this is going to be interesting to see if they can get this across. But it felt like it was across the finish line, really.
Wow.
I mean, I think for Mark Stoops, it was. And I don't know if anybody will ever say that, but, you know, like I have it on pretty good authority that he told his coaching staff he was leaving.
Mm-hmm.
And then had to go back. I don't know, like, hey, gotcha.
Don't fire that email just yet.
Hey, about that conversation. So, yeah, and then it starts going that it's
Yeah.
not going to go down. And I'm like, wow. This is because the Kentucky people, I saw even like, was it KSR? Like there were tweets like, "Thank you, Mark." Like everybody,
Yeah.
it was real, and it got nixed. I think across the finish line. I think they were like, wait, turn around, walk your ass back to Lexington.
Do you think that sped up the Elco hire though?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think there were a lot of people that went, look, we did the due diligence.
Yeah.
We looked nationally. They looked at, Dan Lanning. And I think you and I talked back then. I was like, they can't hire him. And Bama couldn't either.
Right.
That buyout is so prohibitive. And nobody in the media, it's $20 million.
Mm-hmm.
There are Aggies that would say, I'll pay $20 million to buy out if it's the coach we want. It's not $20 million. It's like more like 50.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, DeBoer was absolutely on the board, but he also wasn't. And who knows if he knew about
Saban too.
But yeah, you weren't going to talk to him until Washington was done. A&M couldn't afford to wait on that. So I think there were a lot of Aggies that mattered that at the very beginning.
Was Campbell legit?
No.
Okay.
They checked, but
Yeah.
I told everyone from the beginning. I said it on media or whatever. Dan Campbell ain't leaving Detroit. Not right now. Not until he either accomplishes what he's there to do and brings that city a championship, or it doesn't work and they get rid of him. He's not. And
could you imagine A&M hiring a Super Bowl winning coach?
No.
Like
No.